Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to our last official week of school. I can't believe it. I think I've said that a lot, but every time it gets more and more real. And you know how emotional I am. Let's get into our Today in History. Today in History, June 8th, 1968. James Earl Ray, an escaped American convict, is arrested in London, England, and charged with the assassination of African-American civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. Sorry, it got cut off there a little bit. So Martin Luther King Jr. had actually been assassinated about 2 months earlier on April 4th of the same year. But obviously, James Earl Ray fled to Europe, where he was eventually captured and brought back to the United States, and he was convicted of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Right, King was shot on the balcony outside of the now famous Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Alabama, and pretty monumental, a huge blow to the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And honestly, to the world. Right. Before we get into today's lesson, we do have a birthday. So it was actually on the 6th, but that was Saturday, so we didn't do any of this. So happy belated birthday to Abigail. I hope you had an awesome day. I know Saturday was kind of like rainy and gross, but I'm sure that you found a way to celebrate anyway. So I hope it was a great day besides the rain. Okay. So today's lesson is going to be a little different. I know I had said on Friday that it was like your last written lesson of the year. However, as a social studies department, the 8th grade teachers decided that given the current state of the world, specifically the United States, that we would be doing you a disservice if we didn't talk about the current events that are going on within our country, especially because it relates so heavily to things that we've studied this year. We did the civil rights movement together. And I think one of the things that I mentioned is that the civil rights movement is, right, ever evolving. That did it help accomplish a lot of things during its time period? Absolutely. Do we still have a long way to go? Also, yes. And a lot of the times when we talk about the civil rights movement, people associate it with the movement in the 1950s and 1960s, which is 100% true, right? That's when we had a lot of activism and a lot of push for change happening. However, the civil rights movement is a living movement, right? It's something that didn't stop in the 1960s, and it didn't end with Martin Luther King Jr.'s death, and it's something that we need to constantly be pushing for at the base value of equal rights, right? That everyone deserves to be treated equally, no matter what you look like, no matter what you believe. Right? So we are going to talk about the effectiveness of the civil rights movement, right? Did it achieve its goal? So what you guys have here is just a brief overview of the civil rights movement. I know that we did talk about it this year. However, that was an entire unit ago, and this unit has taken us almost a month to get through. So in, I think, 8th grader time, that's a really long time, and especially since I wasn't physically with you when we went through it, I just want to refresh everything that we're talking about here. And a key thing that I just want to point out is that in here we make sure that we mention that there were two main civil rights leaders, right? Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, both of whom we've spoken about, and both of whom had pushed for an end to discrimination, an end to segregation, and for equal rights for African Americans. However, both men had very different ways that they sought to achieve that end goal. All right, so you have here what was the goal of the civil rights movement based on that reading and your prior knowledge. Right? And then we're going to talk a little bit about racism and how it exists in our world today, and specifically the idea of what's known as systemic racism. And now some of you may have been currently following the events that are going on, and if you are, it's awesome. I think it's important to stay up on current events, and if you're not, that's okay also. I know that this is a really intense topic, and it's hard for a lot of adults to fully understand everything that's going on. And I think it's also important to recognize that nobody, I think, can fully understand, right? It's always important to constantly be learning, constantly be seeking out information, constantly be trying to be better, right? But essentially, systemic racism is this idea that people of color, right, and I'm not just saying blacks because it doesn't just apply to blacks, right? It applies to Latinos, anyone of Asian or Pacific Islander descent, Native Americans, that people of color have been oppressed within this country, right, and society through things like biases in education and media and employment and things of that nature. So we found this video that kind of tries to break down exactly what systemic racism is in terms that are easy for you guys to understand, because it is a very complex idea. But a lot of what people are arguing and pushing for change for now is based in this idea of systemic racism, okay? And then we're going to talk about George Floyd, because that really is the catalyst of this entire current civil rights movement. We will not be showing you the video. I don't think that, as a teacher, that's not my call to make for you guys to watch. If your parents, decide that that's something they'd like you to do, they can. It's just not something that I feel comfortable showing you guys. So we're not going to, but we are going to just present you with facts of what happened. And I hope that you guys realize that throughout this, I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other, right? The point of this lesson is to present you with facts and allow you to make decisions, right? Because while, yes, I think I call you my kids because you are kids, you're 13 years old, you're also at a point in your life where you're starting to make decisions about the kind of person that you want to be and the things that you want to believe. And as a teacher, my job is to just present you with facts and let you come to your own conclusions. I think I would be doing you a disservice if I presented you with biased information. Right? And we know that there are a lot of biases out there, so that's why we're trying to just stick with facts here. Right? So this is the facts of what happened that day involving George Floyd. Okay? The next part is, how does America respond? And that's a lot of what has been monopolizing the media lately, right, for good reason. And there have been, I think, two very different ways of handling these things, right? We've seen protests, which I spoke to you about protests when we were in school and with the civil rights movement. If you are trying to enact change and you are trying to get a message out there, a protest is one of the most effective ways to bring mass attention to an issue quickly, right? However, unfortunately, there have been small groups of protesters that have turned those protests into riots. So we have given you quotes from Donald Trump and Barack Obama. We thought it was important to choose these two people because they're your most recent presidents, and they're coming one Democratic viewpoint, one Republican viewpoint. So we're trying to give you guys both sides of this, the view here that there is. All right. And then I want to know, what are your thoughts? Right? There is no right or wrong answer here, and I think that's really important for you guys to understand, is that I'm not looking for you, I'm not going to be grading an accuracy thing on here. I just want to know, what are you thinking? Because this is really important, and it's things that you guys are living through history right now, right? What's happening is most likely something that I will one day teach to children, maybe your children. So it's important. And then finally, at the base of this, do you think the civil rights movement achieved equality, right? That was this whole push, that the civil rights movement is equality for all people. Do you think that that effectively happened? All right. So I'm going to say that I know this is a very sensitive subject, but I think as 8th graders, we have been able to put together a lesson that breaks it down for you in a way that it is digestible and understandable. And of course, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or have conversations with your parents at home. I'm sure a lot of you already have, and that's awesome. And if you haven't, you can spark those conversations, or you're old enough to do research and find things out on your own. It's really up to you. But as a social studies department, we decided that we couldn't not address this. And I think the district, too, is something, Dr. Card sent out a statement that this is something that we felt that we needed to address. All right. So this will be your last written lesson for the year. Okay. Again, reach out if you have any questions. And of course, as always, stay safe and make good choices. Bye, guys.